Um, so that's the announcements for tonight. So tonight, our speaker is Richard Ader. You've been a member of the club for
3 years.
3 years? Okay, that's what I thought, about 3 years. And he's going to be speaking on basically travel photography, not so much a travelogue, but kind of talking about equipment and how to take good travel photography. So without further ado, let me introduce Richard.
Okay, well, thank you. Let me share screen here and get things up and running. Let's see. Okay. Good. Okay, everyone could see that now. You see it, Mike? Okay.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. This is going to be my talk on travel photography, how to photograph in multiple settings under any conditions. Now, I know travel has been hard this year. 2020 has been rough, but the end is in sight. My goals for tonight are going to be to prepare the photographer to be able to travel anywhere on the planet under any conditions and bring back great photos. As photographers, we're always looking for new venues, new pictures, and there's a whole world out there. And I hope to kind of whet your appetite tonight. I've been traveling for 5 decades overseas, and I wanted to make this not so much a travelogue, just a bunch of my pictures, but a lot of tips and techniques for travelers based on my experiences. Basically, if there is a mistake to be made, I've either seen it made or made it myself, and I hope to pass these on to you and to really get you all interested. This is a varied audience. Some of you I know have traveled extensively, others not so much or at all. So I'm hoping there's something for everybody here. So let's get started. What I'm going to be covering tonight are types of trips, gear, pre-trip research, traveling, various travel scenarios, wildlife, dealing with the lack of a tripod, shooting from boats, shooting iconic structures, looking for unusual viewpoints, techniques, miscellaneous topics and thoughts, and why you shouldn't ignore your smartphone, and then items to consider after the trip. Now, there are 3 types of trip basically. Photo tours are designed for photographers. All aspects of the tour are geared and tailored for photographers. The light conditions are made ideal, and transportation and transporting gear are all taken care of. Instruction and guidance are usually given on site, and this is not going to be the primary topic of this talk. These are really specialty tours and not what most of us go on. Personal travel is very common. You're on your own, possibly with a car at your disposal. Some of the pros here are it's more flexible. The time of day and length of time at a site are under your control. You can go when the light is just right and stay for as long as you want. Another pro is the ability to carry more equipment, especially a tripod. One of the disadvantages or cons, it's only practical in limited parts of the world. This is very difficult, take my word for it, in Mongolia, where there are no roads outside the capital and no one speaks English. And good luck trying this in Antarctica, but there are a lot of pluses to personal travel. Probably the most common tours are group tours. Now, this has a lot of advantages. The pro is it's easier day-to-day travel arrangements and less hassle. They take care of all the arrangements for you. Another pro is you get a chance to see more sites than if alone. They pack things back to back, you're one to the other. Another pro is the whole world is available. There are tours you could get to Mongolia, the Himalayas, Antarctica. You can get tours with a few people, a lot of people, cheap tours, expensive tours. They're just something for everyone. A very, very big plus is that you can travel with a non-photo companion. My wife hates photography, wants nothing to do with it, but we could travel together because she's with the tourists and watching that, and I'm lagging behind taking pictures. A few of the disadvantages, usually you have less time to photograph at each location. As the tour moves on, you have to move with it. It's difficult to bring a tripod because you have to carry it most of the day yourself, and you're usually not stopping long enough in order to set up and shoot. Another con is that you have no control over time of day and therefore light at each location. I was brought to the pyramids at 11 in the afternoon. The sun is directly overhead, and there's just nothing you can do about that as well. But group tours are a phenomenal way to get out and just see the world. Here, the age-old desire, the conundrum of every photographer, the desire to bring everything, and the reality, believe me, you'll have to lug it around all day, every day. Cameras, single lens reflex is the old standby. Mirrorless, the newer cameras out there, they will all do an excellent job. There are no real downsides. The mirrorless, battery life in some cases a little bit of a concern, not that big a deal. Let me say one thing about full frame versus crop sensors. It really doesn't make a difference, except that crop sensors, if you're using DX lenses, they are much lighter weight. They are smaller than the equivalent FX lenses. But the concept, and there's a lot written, and I'll oversimplify it, that you get more reach with the crop sensor is really not the case. The image size from the lens is the same. You're just looking at a smaller part of it. It's an optical illusion in a sense. The difference between if you take a picture with a crop sensor and a 1.5 magnification factor and a full frame and just enlarge that to the same thing is actually very, very different. Now, again, that's oversimplifying, but if you're going out and trying to choose one or the other, it's not that really that big of a deal. Suggested lenses, I find in the range, and again, this is my preference, is in the range for overall photography is about 24 to 200 millimeters. And that is if you're in a market like in Fez, Morocco here, where we were in the souk, the corridors are extremely narrow and I'm backed up as far as I can. If I want to get all those delectable fish on the table, you need some kind of at least a 24 millimeter to get that all in. On the other hand, that bird of prey, whatever it is, not my area of expertise, but was up high on the tree, a 200 millimeter is able to bring that in. Now, if you are into landscape photography and a specialized interest that way, you're going to want a 16 millimeter or up or whatnot. That's a specialized interest. If you're going particularly for a wildlife safari, you might want to rent or bring a much longer lens. But in general, in this range, since space is a limitation, you are able to capture most everything. And filters, UV or haze protective filters versus lens hood. Now, Dave Bush has given an excellent talk on this. The bottom line is it's more of a religious kind of preference. People swear by one or the other and have anecdotal stories. The data that Dave presents nicely shows that really lens protective filters are not as protective as you would think. And they're not really a necessity either. As you see, most lens hoods now go over far out from the lens and do a fairly good job of protecting it. So one way or the other, it doesn't make a difference. My point here is that it's not an absolute must. Some suggestions of type of filters. Now, these are just not necessities again, but suggestions. A polarizing filter, we all know what that's used for, routinely deepening colors, reflections. But if you're in an airplane, it's extremely good for shooting out windows without any glare. I was crossing the Himalayas. I knew I'd be going by Mount Everest. In the cabin, the lights were up high. There's reflection on the window. This is a triple pane window, but yet with the polarizing filter in place, you're able to get a very, very clear image. And on the right, again, on the airplane, flying into Ulaanbaatar, the capital of Mongolia, on the side of one of the mountains there is a giant picture of Genghis Khan. The only way to get it is from the airplane. And again, with the cabin lights, it's nice to be able to shoot out a window and get a decent picture, actually good picture, with the polarizing filter. Graduated neutral density filter is another suggestion, but again, not a necessity. If you have a high dynamic range, a lot of sky and whatnot, it's an item you could consider, but again, not a necessity. Neutral density, 2 to 10 stop filters. If you're taking a tripod, fine, if you want to try to slow down water and whatnot. But if you're not going to be taking a tripod, no sense bringing those filters. In terms of rain gear, one thing I've always done, and it has saved me in many situations, is to just take a large plastic garbage bag, the 90-gallon ones, fold it up, and whatnot, it takes up zero space at all. Yet, if the sky opens up on you, it is nice to be able to take that out and put your whole camera bag in it, and knowing that it will absolutely not get wet. Even if your camera bag is listed as being rain resistant or rain protective, if the sky opens up in some of these rainforest areas too, it's like having it underwater. So just a little trick that's saved me a number of times. Now, everyone carries a lens brush, but my plea here is for lens tissue and lens cleaner. They are all extremely valuable. The lens brush is fine if you get a little particulate matter on your lens, but if it rains and you get drops on, the lens brush isn't going to help there. And rather than using your shirt or whatnot, lens tissue is the way to go. Lens cleaner is also a necessity because if you get film, if there is dust around and you get film, you're not just going to want to rub it in with the lens paper, you put a little lens cleaner on. All 3 of these are cheap, they're small, they fit easily into the bag and should be taken. Now, the black bag, the black rectangle around the beanbag is because this is the most valuable piece of equipment that you'll have in your bag. I highly recommend it. I don't think anyone should be traveling without this. It's just a beanbag, as it says. You could get these, just look it up on Google, B&H Photo, anywhere. As you can see on the left and in the middle shots, it's just a beanbag. It folds up, fits in there. But if you fold it up and put it under your camera, you see that the camera lens nestles into it. And it's almost as stable as a tripod. And there's always, if there are rocks or boulders around, railings, anything like that, if you just put the lens on it, the lens is going to move around. It's not that steady, really, and you damage your lens. Putting this on, and you are almost as steady as a tripod. Now, a flash is usually not needed in travel photography and not recommended. Again, it's just an extra piece of equipment. A tripod is usually not practical if you're on a group tour, more feasible if you're traveling on your own. It gets back to, yeah, I would love to take one if possible. Backup gear, in some remote locations, stores are not an option. I repeat, stores are not an option. Extra batteries, extra memory cards, extra lens and body cap. Now, if anyone who thinks that a memory card failure is rare and will not happen, they are right, it is rare. But if you travel enough, and I have seen it happen, and if your memory card goes and you don't have an extra, all the time and money you put into this trip is for naught. And to give you an idea of sometimes how difficult it is, I have this picture that was taken in the Sahara Desert. This is an actual picture in the Sahara Desert. And you could see pixel connection is a long way off one way, and B&H Photo is a long way off the other way. It's easier just to have your little extra. Data backup, something to think about. My goal, the way I do it personally, and have done it for many, many years, is to have 2 sets of files in 2 separate locations and to try to do this daily. This is actually quite easy. I travel with a small laptop, card reader, and a small external drive. At the end of the day, I download my card onto the laptop, duplicate a copy onto the external drive, and the laptop and external drive are kept in 2 different bags. They have 2 different pieces of luggage. So if one is lost, you have the other. This actually takes up very little space. It is easy to take with you, and doing it at the end of the day just takes a few minutes and is actually no problem at all. But then you have, in a sense, unlimited memory because you're clearing your card every day. Camera bag gets overlooked a lot. I strongly would consider a photographic backpack for the ease, mobility, and weight distribution. And you see the backpack on the left. In the middle, you can see how much it holds. It holds a lot of equipment. I carry usually 30, 35 pounds of equipment. And you could see on the right there, it is distributed over my shoulders, whereas a camera bag is on one side. So that my arms are free, it's over my shoulders. And if you could notice how I'm carrying the camera is not over my neck, it's over my shoulder and through one arm. So again, it takes pressure off your neck. And you can see I am also demonstrating, though not purposely, the protective lens hood as I bang the camera again against that concrete post inadvertently. Now, this is in my younger and not, I would say, kind of stupider days. When I was traveling with a camera bag, same 30, 35 pounds of equipment, but you could see that it goes over the shoulder only. So it's all distributed in one spot, and the camera is around my neck. So that's a lot of weight around your neck. And at the end of the day, that could make a difference as we get older. So the photographic backpack is a thing to consider. Now, pre-trip research is an interesting area that's not done a lot, but I find it actually part of the fun of the trip. It gives you an idea of the suggested views and angles before you get there. It gives you an idea of what lens you might want to use, so you can start thinking about it. It prepares you in case the time at the site is short. And what I do is look up sites on Google, photo sites such as SmugMug and Flickr. And to use an example, a few years ago, I traveled to Morocco, and I knew I was going to be seeing the tannery in Fez, Morocco. Now, this is a structure where they tan things almost in big vats, and it's way over 1,000 years old. And I wanted to get an idea of what this would be like to photograph. So the first I went to Google under images, and you could see hundreds of images of the Fez tannery there. As I look, it's interesting. They're almost all taken from up above. So my first clue is I'm not going to be walking around the vats. They're taken from up above. I went on to then SmugMug, photo site, or Flickr, and looked at more images. And I saw, again, most of them were taken from above. The images they have of some of the men are also with a good sized telephoto and also from above. So I got an idea what my view would be and also what kind of lenses I would need. I then went on to Wikipedia, researched something about the site, knew a lot more about it and the area around it. And then interestingly, I was on TripAdvisor, and that gave me a very important bit of information. It was touting this area to really, if you're traveling on your own, see the tannery so that you weren't pushed with all the other tourists who were seeing it from, and they gave the address where all the tourists stop off and see it. So then using that address, I went to Google Maps, Street View, as you can see in the bottom left, and lo and behold, this is the balcony that actually TripAdvisor listed that all the tourists stop at. So ahead of time, sitting in my house, I realized that this was most likely going to be my vantage point, and it gave me a chance to think out what type of lens I would use, what type of angle, because sure enough, when we got there, there were multiple tours there. We were shuttled up. You had about 5 minutes and then out. But already knowing exactly what it was going to look like and what I wanted to use, I was really prepared and can concentrate on the creative aspect rather than, oh my gosh, what do I want to use? And this is one of my pictures of many from the tannery. So an interesting way to go about with the pre-trip research, and it's part of the fun of the trip. Now, try never to check photographic equipment. Always try to keep it with you. I can't emphasize enough. These are quotes from the FAA site. On average, airlines lose around 2 bags for every 1,000 passengers. Every day, there's about 2.9 million airline passengers. And don't bother to sit and try to do the math. I've done it for you. 5,800 bags lost per day. If you're going across the Atlantic and back, that means 11,600 bags are lost on a 2-way trip. And in the words of Clint Eastwood, Dirty Harry, how lucky do you feel? You've put a lot of time, effort, money, everything into this trip. To chance it that I'm not going to be one of those 11,600 is just not smart. And I've seen items lost in transit. Check the weight and space rules for carry-on for smaller planes within a country, and this is often overlooked. A photographic backpack is smaller than an equivalent photo bag and will fit in the overhead bin on small planes. When you travel transatlantic, you have a huge overhead bin. When you travel in country, you're usually on a small commuter plane and the rules are a lot less. And if you really have a full pack camera bag, you might be faced at the last minute with being told you have to check it as well. I've been on small Cessnas too, where ahead of time, knowing that, I've broken up my bag into two ways to carry that on. So again, a bit of things to check ahead of time so you're not trying to figure it out on site. Now, different travel scenarios. Cold. Now there's cold and then there's cold. This is Antarctica. When you travel to Antarctica, sometimes, depending on the season you're going in, it could be down to -40. That is really cold. This is the British base at Port Lockroy in Antarctica. And battery life plummets in severe cold. Always bring backup batteries if you're shooting in a cold environment. Now, keep the backup batteries warm. Consider keeping them under your shirt, actually on your body, if you're in extreme conditions. That was us trekking across Antarctica below. And even with the batteries strapped to my skin under all of my clothing, I was only able to get about 50 or 60 shots off a battery before the cold would just take it. So that's the general principles of cold depletes batteries is true in most cold areas. Heat. Now, there's again heat, just like cold, and there's extreme heat. This is when I was 2 summers ago in Egypt, southern Egypt. This is down by Sudan. And this is a screenshot from my iPhone. You could see on the left, it was 109 degrees. But cheer up, because the screenshot on the right shows that during the week, it was going to go down to 102. At 109 degrees, strange things happen. Now, this isn't the only place you get heat. When I was in Morocco, we were down towards Algeria, just by the border, and in the Sahara Desert for 5 days. And it was way above 100 every single day. So you will encounter significant heat in a lot of places you go. Now, heat has more of an effect on you than on your camera and equipment. What was interesting, extreme heat might make the black metal lens too hot to touch. This actually happened in the 109 degrees. I had to use a cloth in order to handle my 70 to 200 lens because it was too hot to touch with my skin. That's very rare. Usually it's just hot. Avoid rapid transition from air conditioning to heat to avoid condensation on the inside of the lens. This actually happens fairly often, usually under conditions of high humidity, not dry heat. And stay hydrated. This is important because your equipment might be working perfectly, your lens might be set right, but if you're passing out and dizzy, it does no good. And I see that actually quite often where people don't take enough to drink. The advantage of the photo backpack is you could slip bottles of water in there. These are 2 times where actually condensation made a difference. The left is in Shanghai. I came from the hotel across the street out to photograph this pagoda, and it was in the upper 90s in both temperature and humidity. And as I came out of the hotel, the lens just fogged up on the inside, and I had to wait a good 20 minutes standing there before the condensation went away. You can't wipe it away. It's on the inside of your lens. The same on the right. This is in Queensland in Australia. I came out of the minibus that we were in, which was air conditioned, out into the high humid heat of the jungle. And again, good 15 to 20 minutes. Now, the only way you can prevent this is a more slow transition from the heat into the cold. But that's usually not practical. It's more advantageous just to understand, to give yourself enough time that you might have to wait before taking the picture. Now, sand, water, and salt water. Now, sand is ubiquitous. It's in a lot of places. And when it's all around you on the ground, that's no problem. Blowing sand, though, can possibly get in the camera and lens and damage the lens surface. You have to protect your camera and lens. And consider, this is the one time to consider a protective lens filter if you're going to be shooting in blowing sand. When I was in the Sahara, in this picture on the right, that evening we were in our tent and a sandstorm was blowing up. Now they are very, very intense there, and I did not shoot in the sandstorm, but if I had, it was almost like sandblasting. You felt it outside and you saw its effect on the cars and everything else, or the Jeeps we were using afterwards. So protect the glass, especially with blowing sand, and also clean your lens after shooting with lens fluid and your lens tissue. Water is also ubiquitous. We're always around waterfalls. There's always blowing water. It's raining, it's misting. Most bodies and lenses are well sealed and minimal protection is needed. The lens hood also partially shields the glass in the rain. And so if you're shooting and it starts to mist or rain or whatnot, this is usually not a big problem. If you plan particularly on shooting in the rain, you can purchase protective covers that fit right over a particular lens or use a plastic bag. But casual water, such as from a light rain or waterfalls or whatnot, is usually not a problem with today's cameras, and you could just wipe things off afterwards. Salt water is a whole different animal here. Now, this is Cape Horn off South America. This is where the Atlantic Ocean on the right. We are right on the dividing line. The Pacific Ocean is on the left. The difference in these two oceans' temperatures make this a rough area. There is blowing salt water all the time. Salt water is corrosive. It can be corrosive to both camera and lens. You should protect the camera and lens. And here's the important thing, to wipe it off with a damp cloth soaked in fresh water afterwards to get rid of the salt residue. And that usually does it. And of course, clean the lens with lens fluid and lens tissue afterwards to get the residual salt water off. And with simple just spray from salt water, this is enough to do it. Although I have seen long-term people who've showed me their cameras that have areas of corrosion on it from salt water in the past. So a little bit of wiping afterwards is protective. Now, wildlife.
Richard,
yes.
Before you get too far, can we stop and see if there's any questions?
Sure, no problem.
All right. If you have a question, unmute yourself. And if we have no questions, then
I have a couple comments.
okay.
I've traveled a lot and photographed for decades as well, and I agree very much with what he said so far. Just a couple other suggestions. Besides the beanbag, there's also clamping tripods. ProMaster makes something called the clamper, and I found that very helpful. And for blowing sand, I also take a soft toothbrush and wipe off my cameras, especially around the switches and knobs and so forth, the little crevices.
Okay.
Excellent. Yeah, there are many ways to do this, and you're right about the little clamp and whatnot. And my purpose here is to get you thinking about these things. In other words, if you don't have a tripod, don't give up. You have things like the clamp, the beanbag, to think about things like the sand and salt water rather than just do nothing. So yeah, those are excellent points.
Richard, how heavy is that beanbag?
The beanbag is just a few ounces. It's extremely light. It's a little vinyl things in them, and it has almost no weight. And in your camera bag, it works well because it actually acts as a cushion for some of your lenses too.
Okay, thank you.
Where did you say you could get that? Like B&H or?
Yeah, B&H, or just Google, photographic beanbags, and you'll have just hundreds of them as well. Amazon as well too. It's an extremely common item.
Okay.
And it comes in all different, sizes and whatnot. Just pick one you might think. You should have one though that you could nestle, just like you have in this picture here with the 7200. So it kind of just, when you put the camera down, it just nestles in there.
Okay. How many memory cards do you usually take with you?
I shoot in RAW. I'm 36 megapixels and shoot in RAW. But with a good size, I take 2 memory cards. They're CF cards, and one acts as a backup to the other. I only wind up using one and clear it every day. But with the memory cards nowadays, even shooting RAW, I get up to 800 RAW on a single one, which is fine for a day of shooting. And if not, I have the other one in the bag. So that's 1600. So with the memory cards nowadays, I don't think any more than two, one and then as a backup. I also do this, I'm able to do this too because I clear my cards every night.
Right.
So a consideration is if you're just going to take cards and not clear them or download them every night or every other night, then you'll need more memory.
Okay, good.
What size memory card do you use?
I think it's a 64 gigabyte
Okay.
card. And what's easy to do and what you should do is, the megabytes, like it's about 80 megabytes per picture on mine. And you'll know then for your memory card or any memory card, how many you can get on. And you know about how many shots you take a day. If you're on a tour, you want the ability to take about 700-800 shots. And then you could just plan accordingly too. You just don't want to limit yourself by saying, I don't want to take this burst mode, or I don't want to take this one because I'm worried about memory. You shouldn't have to worry about memory. It's cheap enough.
Okay. All right. We'll go on, and maybe after
Okay.
20 minutes or so, take another
Yep.
break
You
for
just
questions.
let me know.
Okay.
Okay. Now, wildlife. Now, if you're going on a photo safari, that's a whole different thing. But a lot of times we just, come into contact with animals and whatnot. And unless you're on a photo safari specifically, you might not have either a tripod or as long a lens as you might want. In this case, technique becomes critically important to allow significant cropping. And this is where the beanbag or clamp like that comes in. I went to Tanzania, and I'm going to show you some of these images. And we were out, but wildlife was only part of it. I also wanted to take people. I wanted to take landscapes. So I had my 70-200, which is not ideal for reach for wildlife. We were in Jeeps with a sunroof there, standing up, putting the beanbag like you see here on the sunroof and resting my camera there as well. It was almost as steady as a tripod. And this elephant was quite a distance away, and you could see it's tack sharp. Again, technique, if you don't have good technique and your camera isn't steady, then there's not much. Now, these were all from at least a quarter of a frame. Nothing was smaller than a quarter of a frame. These took up about a quarter to a half the frame, not full frame, and then were enlarged to get this. So this is the elephant. Zebras are extremely skittish, so I wasn't close to this. I was quite a distance away, filled about a quarter of the frame. But you could see, again, with today's vibration reduction or image stabilization plus technique, the beanbag, this blow up, again, tack sharp. Water buffalo, mean, unruly animals. They're just miserable, and they'll charge you for no reason at all. So obviously I'm not close to this as well. This filled about a quarter of the frame. But again, with a 200 millimeter, which is not ideal for a safari, you could get great shots by good technique and enlarging. That bird of prey on the left, as well as the vultures on the right. You could see the feathers on the vulture and the tips of the beak, very sharp. Again, 200 millimeter only, but able to enlarge them. Hyena, mean, ugly, unruly animals. You can tell I really love these animals. But again, not close to this. This was also from about a quarter of a frame enlargement. Birds. This bird on the left came out. I thought it was great. I saw it in the distance. This is enlargement from a little less than a quarter of a frame, but again, tack sharp with technique and the beanbag. A cheetah up in the tree, obviously not close to that. Hippo. Hippo, smelly animals too. I'm a fair distance away, but here by this river, I am out of the Jeep, and there is a railing by this river, and it's a smooth metal railing. The beanbag is draped, as you saw it before, over the railing. The camera is nestled on the beanbag, and again, you're able to, from a quarter frame, you see the enlargement, the eye, everything is just tack sharp. So it's a consideration. Yes, it would be nice to have a 400 millimeter or 500 millimeter lens, but that's something extra you have to carry, and I'm not going specifically for wildlife. Some zebras that were way off in the distance, sharp, and you could see on the other side of the river, the gazelles even. So you could do some good work again with technique. Now, the lack of a tripod, if you're traveling in a group and you can't take one, the beanbag for stability, don't be afraid to boost your ISO. Today's cameras handle high ISO phenomenally. And with the software designed for noise reduction, you can get away with an awful lot. Night shots are possible without a tripod, and also try handheld HDRs. If you have a very high dynamic range, doing a burst of 3 shots with 1 or 2 stop auto bracketing is really feasible, and you do not need to brace the camera with a beanbag. You could actually hand hold and do that. Here is Cairo late at night, and I show this because again, everything came, this was shutter speed only about a 60th, but again, high ISO, and with the noise reduction and whatnot, it actually was fine, fairly noise free. So you could do night shots, shots of different signs at night and things too, handheld without a tripod. This is by Algeria. This is the sun going down over the Atlas Mountains. And as it goes down, again, this is a 200 millimeter. This is a long exposure, a little higher ISO. What this is, I took a folding chair and just put it down and put the beanbag on that, rested the camera on the beanbag, and was able to use whatever exposure I want to get a good sharp image with the 200 millimeter. This photo this was in the jungle area of Laos. It was a small village. We were in a little hut at night. The only illumination was a single incandescent bulb above this man. I was in a hut. I could not get closer. So this is from across the room with a 200 millimeter handheld. ISO was really boosted on this. The vibration reduction helped. But I show this image to show that give it a try. It should not deter you. The lack of a tripod under very low light conditions, you can really come away with some good pictures. This is in Caesarea in Israel, some of the Roman ruins. And I show this because this is a handheld HDR. This is 3 shots, just holding the camera up, doing a burst of 3, auto bracketed, and then merged in software for an HDR image. Another HDR image in Israel. Again, these are not so much I'm showing for the artistic value, but to show that this was a handheld, that it is certainly doable to do a handheld HDR of 3 shots. Anything more than that is a little bit more difficult, but 3 shots are doable. Another HDR, 3 shots, bracketed, merged in software. This is Angkor Wat in Thailand, and everyone usually gets it at sunrise. This is in the blue hour before sunrise, where it's not as artistic and it's really dark there. But I show you this image and the reflection in the water only to show that this also is handheld with high ISO vibration reduction, what you can get away with, and encouraging you to definitely try these shots, and you can do it in traveling without the tripod. Water. This is a 1-second exposure done handheld by using the beanbag on a railing. The camera was secured on the beanbag, and you could see the water is blurred nicely. The leaves are sharp. So again, you can get more than you think without a tripod. Shooting from boats. Shutter speed, shutter speed, shutter speed. One of my first jobs I had when I was young was a Dodd camera. I remember selling in Shaker Heights to a man, a very expensive Nikon. He came back from his trip and really started yelling at me that I sold him a dud because his pictures were all blurry, and you guessed it, he shot him from a boat at a 30th of a second, you know, and I was trying to tell me it was the camera. ISO boosted up, so you're shooting at about a 500th, but 1,000th minimum if choppy water. Again, shutter speed is key. Depth of field is not that critical here. This is going down the Nile. That boat there's a gentle waving motion. So that boat is moving up and down. We're moving up and down. And you could see the lettering and writing, the people, everything is sharp, thousandth of a second. There's some kind of, I never saw the rest of this animal. This is all anyone ever sees but there is an animal down there. I show this because this is off the coast of Iceland. And these waters were very choppy. And first, before I show you about the picture, I want to tell you not to be impressed. For each picture you see here, there are at least 30 pictures of just water. This is the advantage of digital. You just keep shooting. But very, very choppy water, shooting fast, and this is about a 1500th of a second, you can see that you can get a sharp image. You can see the water coming off the tail on the upper left there too. Is again, shutter speed is key. At least a 1500, a 2000th of a second. If the light is good, higher shutter speed. This is in Ha Long Bay off of Hanoi in Vietnam. This was a woman on a little houseboat, and the houseboat was rocking up and down, and we were on a little boat rocking up and down. But again, I bring this picture up to show you that at a fast shutter speed, you can capture the action there, or capture the picture and get it quite sharp. Now this young fellow, this is off the coast of Antarctica. I'm not even in a boat. I'm in a Zodiac. The boats can't come in this close because of the ice flows, so they offload you into a rubber Zodiac. So you're down at the level of the water, bobbing up and down, freezing. So went by this one penguin greeter who greets you on the way in. Again, I wanted to get this shot, but you're bobbing up and down. This is at a 2000th of a second, just grabbing it, and you could see you can do it, but shutter speed is key. Now, shooting iconic structures. And this is the one thing that makes it, to me, it's like a challenge. It's hard to produce a unique photograph of an iconic structure since many thousands, tens of thousands have photographed the same thing. You've seen a million pictures of the Eiffel Tower. So try to find different points of view that you haven't seen before. And sometimes you could find that unique shot, and sometimes you can't. And this is Ayers Rock, or Uluru, in the middle of the outback, in the middle of Australia. And it's famous because it's a giant sandstone structure that protrudes right in the middle of the outback. But in the golden hour, just after sunrise and just before sunset, it glows red. The problem is this parking lot where I am is the only place you're allowed to photograph. You are not allowed in the evening to be up around the mountain itself, and you cannot wander out in the fields. So almost every picture you see of Uluru or Ayers Rock is like this, or from this vantage point. But here's a different vantage point from way up high. You can see this is just at sunrise. The rock is glowing red. There's a 20-mile shadow off and back. And I bring this up because today, drone photography is a way, and I've not done any drone photography, but it's something to keep in mind too, because everyone has a shot of a waterfall in Iceland. But to get a shot from over the edge looking down or whatnot, all of a sudden just takes your breath away. So it's something to consider. The Sydney Harbor Bridge. When I was there, that's the city of Sydney in the background. The Opera House is off to the left out of the picture, but almost everyone photographs this with the Opera House in the picture from the Sydney side looking out. I walked across the bridge just to try to get a picture of that with the city in the background, just a different point of view. The Church of Christ the Savior is one of the iconic structures in Moscow. This is right, the Kremlin is off to the right there, and it's on the Moscow River. I've seen many, many photographs of this, and all usually the same thing, by people just walking around taking the picture. I crossed the bridge here you see over the other side of the Moscow River, and tried to get some of the bridge in to give it a little bit different look. St. Basil's Cathedral in Red Square in Moscow. I was particularly interested in this, as well as this monument to Minin and Pozarsky, which is actually a famous monument there too. But the St. Basil's Cathedral has been photographed by everyone, and you see it is basically the same point of view. So I wanted to capture a little different point of view. So here I shot up from the monument into St. Basil's to try to get that little bit different point of view. The Colosseum. Now that's extremely hard. If you've ever been to Rome, the Colosseum sits in the middle of a parking lot with buses all around and whatnot. It's impossible to almost isolate it. And there are tourists hanging from the rafters. This is an old one from the archives back in the black and white, I think Instamatic days. But you could see the concept that I tried to get under an arch and photograph it just from a little different point of view. Now, as I show you all these and how to try to get a different point of view, sometimes you can't. My picture of the Sydney Opera House, and I have hundreds of them. This is from on the water or whatnot, but every one of my pictures looks like everybody else's pictures. The pyramids, I really was hopeful I'd get that unique shot. We're limited by the amount of time, and again, the time of day was there, but all of my shots of the pyramids look like everybody else's shots. The Sphinx, same thing. You're only allowed to view it from certain points of view, or certain spots, just viewing areas. So my pictures look like everyone else's. The Great Wall of China, you've seen that one before. It looks like everyone else's. I was very interested in photographing the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which is the shot on the right. That is solid gold, that top. It's a very holy site to Muslims. One of the limitations of tours is I did not have a lot of time. I was not able to go up there. So shooting from around different spots in Jerusalem, my pictures look the same as everyone else's. So sometimes it works, it's a challenge, but like these, sometimes it doesn't. Look for unusual viewpoints. Don't just look around you, look up and look down. You've been told that many, many times before. I was at the Dead Sea. This is in Israel. There's a lot to see with the Dead Sea. It's a very interesting area. But I looked up and there are these storks, just giant storks. And I've never seen so many of them, and they're flying in a circle. And I just thought it was a phenomenally interesting picture and was able to get it by looking up. In Moscow, this is in a subway station in one of the outskirts of Moscow. There's a lot of iconography of the old Soviet Union there. And I thought this in the pattern, this is right up on the ceiling, was just phenomenal. So I just lay down on the floor and started shooting up. But again, unless you are looking up and down and around, sometimes you're not going to see these things at all. Wild Mongolian horses. We passed some of these going through Mongolia on one of the rare roads that we were on. The driver stopped, people got out, photographed them, but horses are horses. We had gone over an overpass and I climbed up on the overpass and decided to shoot down. And again, it gives you a little different point of view looking down rather than the standard view of the horses from the side. So think up and think down. Technique. I really, really, really encourage this. Back button focus in continuous mode is highly recommended. It can be used, this one setting can be used for stills, landscapes, and action shots. It's most useful for a quick change from a still object to a moving one. And you can refer to my talk on street photography that's on the YouTube channel for CPS, or I'd be glad to answer questions, later another time on this, but extremally valuable. I was photographing in Hanoi a street vendor who was just sitting on the street corner. So she was there was no movement involved. I took that picture, and then coming up on the right side, there was this little kid driving a motor scooter with his mom on the back. I thought it was a precious picture. I wheeled around, shot it. Now they're moving and coming at me. If I was in single focus mode, shooting the woman on the street corner, the vendor, I would have to switch to continuous focus, autofocus to shoot this. However, if you're in back button focus, you could just, no problem. You just turn, press the button, and you're all set to go. So it's really, really worth using. You will use it for everything, and it's highly invaluable for just these kind of situations. Changing lenses in the field. This is a technique thing. Please change rapidly and with the wind at your back. Sensor dust is a killer, and you could really minimize that with good technique. with the wind at your back and having the other lens with the back cover off, ready to go. So you take one off, put the other one on, is really valuable. Now, miscellaneous topics and thoughts. Group tour thoughts. On group tours, try getting up early before your group, before breakfast, and get out. Get up before the other crowds and walk around. There's better light then, and there are no tourists around. So in areas, where you're at, get up at 6 in the morning, get out, get some shots, come back in for breakfast when everyone else is waking up. You'll be surprised how many other shots you can get and better shots. And occasionally break for the group for a quick look around. And if you stop for, if you spot an opportunity, don't be afraid to ask to stop. You got to start to get used to being not the favorite person on the tour. Now, this was in Morocco. The tour bus had stopped to look at some ruins off to the side of the road back about a quarter mile. I thought the ruins were just not my cup of tea, not that interesting, but I saw this in the distance. So I walked up the road. This is the advantage of having a spouse on the trip with you. You always have someone knowing there's someone missing and is able to yell out for you. But this little shop of fossils and meteorites written in French and the old woman outside really captured my interest. And again, you have to sometimes break away from the group. In Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, the group decided it was going to go and spend 2 hours in a museum. I am not really a museum person, so I said, okay, I'll meet you back here in 2 hours, and walked out, and in Parliament Square, there was this massive statue, and I am sorry I don't have someone in this picture for perspective, but a person, a normal-sized person would not reach up the top of that, from the top of the stairs to the top of that white marble. The statue is about 40 feet high, but I was able to capture a lot of photographs that I would not seen had I been in the museum. So don't be afraid to break from the group sometimes and get out and walk. In Mongolia, we were driving off-road up towards Siberia. This is Lake Baikal in the distance. There was this beautiful rainbow. We were in a convoy of 2 minibuses or jeeps or whatever. I was in the one without the guide, so there was no translator. I saw this rainbow, the guy on the horseback there herding yaks. And I said, I know this would only exist for a few minutes, and we were driving by it. So I just yelled. It didn't matter what I yelled because the driver couldn't speak English anyway, but I just yelled, stop, stop, stop. And he just panicked and stopped, and I got off, took the picture, got back on, apologized, and we drove on. It helps to be just kind of an overall nice person because people will kind of forgive you. And don't spend a lot of time out there. Grab your picture and get back. People will understand. If you're reluctant to take pictures of people, one thing when you're on a tour is to understand that people are more amenable to being photographed in tourist areas. They are used to this. So it's more of a way of life. And so, give it a try when you're in these tourist areas. It's actually not that much of a problem. And try to add context to your photo and avoid tight crops. Tight crops I see all the time. Now, this young boy that was in a village by the Kenyan border. This was in Tanzania. And if you had cropped in tight, you wouldn't get the huts in the background, or if there was just a field in the background. It just wouldn't be the same. You need the huts for context. Now, this is the Imperial Map Monument, which is in the middle of Mongolia by the Gobi Desert, outside the town of Karakoram. Now, this was built by the Mongolians. It's all mosaic in the middle, and it represents the ancient Mongolian Empire. And the reason it's built out here is because the ancient town of Karakoram was Genghis Khan's imperial capital. This was Genghis Khan's capital in the background there. And rather than just take the picture of the monument for more like documentation, I wanted to give context. I wanted that village and with the history of that particular village in the background, so framed it this way. So avoid tight crops. Create photo opportunities. This was in, if you've heard my people talk, this was in Hanoi. I thought the people on motorcycles for the smog, this was not COVID time, this was for the smog. but were really interesting looking. So I camped out by a street light. And as the light turned red, you'd have 50 motorcyclists stop there and just sit. It's like having your own studio. You'd pick out the ones that are interesting, photograph them. Then the light turns green and they move on. And 3 minutes later, you have a whole new studio. So you could just sit there and you've created your own photo opportunities there. So always kind of think of how can I maximize these photos. Cautions. Don't do this. You'd be surprised how often I see this. And I'm not talking about having your camera stolen. The camera strap over the edge is an invitation to getting it snagged and your camera pulled over the side. On the trip to Southeast Asia I was at, this happened to one of the people on the trip with his SLR. On the first day, it was destroyed. He had no camera the entire trip. Think about that. It takes a half second to just put that strap on the table. But now that I pointed this out to you, you'll be amazed how many times you see this. Don't do this. Like I said, you travel enough, you'll see this, you'll see disaster. And key, no picture, repeat, no picture is worth taking a significant risk for. It will not be worth it in the end. This includes all those selfies at the cliffs. I don't care what's on the other side of this fence. It could be the most prize-winning, it could be a 27 in a CPS competition, but nothing is worth crossing this fence to get the picture. So use common sense. Smartphones, a quick word. Current smartphones have a higher megapixel count than the original professional Nikon D1X. Current smartphones, hardware and software compensate for the phone's smaller sensor size, and your smartphone is always with you. I have an old iPhone 6S, so this is not one of the newer ones. This is an ancient one, and you can see tack sharp, tones of the face are excellent, and this is a blown up image here, and it looks excellent. So you can do some really, really good work with your phones. And if you don't have your regular camera with you and you see a picture that you think is going to be really good, absolutely use your phone. Now, after the trip, a short little thing here, my plea for even a minimal amount of post-processing. Now, I am not talking about becoming a Photoshop or Lightroom expert, but simple things. And I want to show you how this makes a difference. You put a lot of time and effort and money into this trip. Cropping. I really like this man. I like the color palette here. This man in barefoot, he's a shop owner outside his shop. I liked everything about it. Unfortunately, there's a tourist standing in the doorway on the right. I'm not that thrilled about the metal tub off to the left. A simple thing, doing nothing else other than cropping. And now, a really, really excellent picture, really the way you want it, with nothing more than a crop. That's one click. Dynamic range. Your eye can see more than your sensor, and post-processing helps compensate. Now, your camera, you could have the most expensive camera. It has limitations. Here was a monk walking in off the street into this building. I really like this shot, but this is not a camera failure. It's not a technique failure. If I had, the dynamic range here is too much for the camera. If I had metered on the monk, the background would have been completely clipped and blown out, and vice versa. With a simple thing in post-processing, bringing out the shadows and bringing down the highlights, there you go. This is moving only 2 sliders in post-processing. 1, 2, and that's it. And you could see now from having a picture, which you're probably going to delete, to having a picture you could be really, really proud of. So I'm talking about simple things here, and I want to kind of whet your appetite and get your mind thinking to just learn a few little skills, because again, from your photo pictures, you could bring back a lot. Sensor dust. The Pyramid of Khufu. I don't care how good your camera is and how great a picture you've taken. If you got those 2 sensor dots there, sensor dust spot dust there, there's actually more. There's nothing you could do. A simple click. This is just 2 clicks with cloning, and they're gone. So again, if you can't do minor amounts of post-processing, sensor dust, and I've seen a lot of people's vacation pictures even good ones that have the sensor dust in them. Now, a bit more, and this is the whet your appetite part. If you need to remove unwanted but avoidable objects in a picture, something like a stick coming out of a person's head, fine. Here is a picture I really liked. There were this family of monks who I was talking to, and they happened to be standing in front of these ancient ruins in Thailand. Excuse me, this was Cambodia. This was in Cambodia. Very, very nice picture. I got down low, but as you can see, along the back, there is a rope and 2 wooden poles. Nice, that's a little complex thing, but it is doable. They're gone. And now it's like you're out in the wild. Now, yes, that's a little bit more advanced, but it is easily doable. There it is on the left, which is a good picture. On the right, though, there's kind of nothing man-made other than the men in the picture. So again, just a little plea. Preserving your work and your memories. Again, you took this trip, it's something special. Photo books, Blurb, Shutterfly, Mixbook, Snapfish. They're not that expensive, easy to make and template driven. You don't have to know anything about computers. And it's a nice way to showcase your work and easy to access. And you could also use them as coffee table books to have out all the time and to bore your friends. It is so much easier than the slide projector, bringing that out. And you see here, I've made some books of my trips. I have them as coffee table books on my coffee table. Easy to do. Photo websites, SmugMug, Flickr, they vary from free to not very expensive, and they usually will host full resolution photos. And the advantage here is you can have your total body of work available at all times. So if you're somewhere and you want to show someone a picture from 10 years ago on one of your trips, you can just pull out your smartphone and just show them. You control the ability to download, so you can have them non-downloadable, so you don't have to worry about your work being taken or copied. And it's a professional way to reference and present your work. And my plea is, please curate your work. I can't tell you how many times I see everyone come back from a trip and just put all of their stuff on. The 10 different photographs of the street vendor, all the same and whatnot. So please curate. Here is my website. I use SmugMug. There are infinite amounts of websites, but you can see it's a way you could just easily click and have all of your favorite images up there. And print, mat, and frame some of your work. Hang in selected areas of your home. And I'm not talking about doing your whole home over in pictures, but it displays the work and keeps your memory alive, the memories alive. The Tiger's Nest Monument, I was with my family in Bhutan, a lot of memories. That's a 30 by 40 inch picture on the left that's on our wall. 2 of my wife's favorites that we have up there. It just keeps the memory alive, and just another suggestion. And finally, an addendum. At the end of the day, the goal is to have fun, to get some good photos, and remember, a good photographer is always ready to adapt and always has his or her finger on the shutter and just kind of go with the flow. So that's my presentation, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and that's it. So I will take off the screen now. Let's see here. I'll stop the share. And we're back.
Bravo, bravo.
Nice job, Richard.
Thank you.
Let's throw it open are there any questions for Richard? I had one question about back button focus,
Yes.
because I use it all the time too, but I don't usually have it in continuous mode. If somebody is moving towards you and you hit the back button, do you have to keep pressing that button with it in continuous mode to keep the focus? Or can you hit it once and then just keep your camera pointed at that person and it will stay in focus?
There is no real reason to use back button focus with single focus like you have it.
Right.
The reason being is because you put it on continuous and it functions that if you're taking a standard just shot of someone stationary, you push the back button, take your finger off, and that's it. It locks on the focus, so it's set. And you just recompose or whatever you want to do and take the picture. But if you hold your finger on the button, on the back button, it stays in continuous.
Okay.
So basically on that street vendor I was taking, I press it once, I take my finger off, and then I actually recompose. I move the camera, I take the picture, the same as if I would have single button autofocus. But then as I quickly turn to the person who's moving at me, I push my finger on the back button and hold it.
Hold it. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And so it functions the same as either taking your finger on and off or holding it, and it converts it from single focus to continuous. So there are no adjustments.
Okay. I just wasn't sure if you needed to hold that back button down so it
Yes, in continuous, you keep it held.
Okay.
But for single, just like you do with the shutter release, you take your finger, your thumb off of it, and it locks it. Even though you're in continuous, it's locked.
Okay.
Richard,
Yeah.
again, I've traveled a lot, done photography for decades. I also was a college professor and teaching. You combine those two very well. Your suggestions are spot on. The way you presented it was very well done. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I hope everyone got something out of it there too. But my pleasure. It really is. It's a lot of fun, and one of the advantages, like you've traveled a lot. I know Vicki and Dennis have traveled a lot, and everything. If you travel a lot, you get to see a lot of these mistakes, and you probably made a lot of them as well. So it's nice to be able to pass these things on, because a lot of people just assume that'll never happen to me. My card will never fail. These kind of things too. So I think enough people saying that, yes, I've seen it happen, helps. So yeah, I'm glad to do it.
Murphy's always around.
Yes, it's certainly true.
Richard, did you take a power converter so you could recharge your laptop?
Yes, I carry a battery charger for the camera batteries and a little charger for the laptop as well. But actually, at the end of the day, it really is carrying a small laptop. The laptops are so small nowadays, they don't take up a lot of space in the luggage. And at the end of the day, you always have downtime. It's a way of actually getting an idea of your pictures and whatnot. But for me, I find it an advantage not only making the two backups in two separate areas, but it helps in terms of just clearing my cards too. One interesting thing when you talk about having seen everything, that is my second beanbag that you've seen. When you travel to some remote areas, and I mean really remote, they sometimes aren't familiar with a lot of these things. And I was under a high security condition in Morocco, at one of the smaller towns. And I had one of the guards, as I was in the airport, actually, he was going through my camera bag. And he took the beanbag and was convinced that that was drug smuggling or opium. And he took out the knife and he sliced it open there and dumped all the little beans there too. And, then told me, okay, looks good, and gave it to me back. And that's it. So you'll get to see a bit of everything.
All right. Any other questions?
Somebody said converters. Most chargers nowadays will take the different voltages. All you really need are different adapters for the sockets.
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought when you're talking converters, I thought you meant charger. And yes, I take a charger, but you're exactly right. In the old days, for those of us who traveled a lot, you used to have to take a 220 to a 110 to 220 converter. Nowadays, all of your electronic, and even when I traveled in Mongolia, in the Himalayas or whatnot, you plug your computer just into the wall or your charger in, and it's fine. You do not need a converter. So that's correct. That's usually not something needed. What you do need, though, is plug adapters when you travel, and you should not forget those. It's just the size of the plug. The American plug will not fit into a two-prong, let's say, Himalayan plug, but you don't need the step-down converter for 220 to 110.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Richard. And for those of you who might not know, Richard is one of the instructors in the intermediate Photoshop class and also Lightroom when we do hold the Lightroom class. So you may see him again sometime.
That's why that little kind of like shameless plug for the post-processing there.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you all very much. Next week is Coleman Rosenberg and famous women photographers. So hopefully we'll see you all next week. All right. Stay safe, everyone.
Bye-bye.